Welcome everybody. Yeah, it's really lovely to have a nice group of you here today for our session on sustainable healthy eating on a budget, which we're really looking forward to. So I am Alice. My name might be familiar to some of you. I work in the support services team alongside my colleagues Anna and Annie. And just to take the opportunity to remind you about what we do in the support service and the different ways in which you can access us. So we have our phone line, you can drop us an email, we have an instant chat feature on our website, you can even send us a text, and we're more than happy to schedule a one-to-one Zoom conversation with you as well, if that's something that you feel would be of benefit. Please do feel free to reach out at any time, whether that's with a particular question, any information that we might be able to help with, or even just to have a bit of a general chat. We're on hand from Monday to Friday, from 10 until 5, and I will put those details, our phone number, email address, etc., in the chat box as well. So on that note, I am really excited to welcome our speaker today. So Rachel White is here with us. And Rachel is a specialist oncology dietitian. She's got experience working in the NHS with oncology patients and across a number of medical fields, including intensive care, surgery, and respiratory as well. Rachel also runs her own company, which is called Rachel White Nutrition, providing sports nutrition advice to athletes. Rachel is also on our advisory board for Ovacome, so we're always really grateful to have her kind of offering her expertise to us in that way as well. And in her free time, Rachel loves trail running, particularly at big hills, which sounds like my worst nightmare, but Rachel loves it. Cycling and baking cakes. Okay, so on that note, Rachel, I will pass over to you, and then we will allow about 10 to 15 minutes for questions at the end of Rachel's session.
Lovely, thank you, Alice. I'll just get my screen. So give me 1 second. Oh, I'm at the end of the presentation. Good. Right. So can everyone see that? We're all good. Lovely. So thank you very much, Alice, for the introduction, and thank you, Ovacome, for inviting me today, and thanks guys for attending as well. So this is a bit, as you can probably tell a bit from my history, this is a little bit of a different talk for me to do. And actually, I was really grateful to be asked, because this has allowed me to take the time to have a little look into it, and kind of sustainable nutrition and budgeting and kind of healthy eating. It's quite hard to know really what to do. It's a real kind of in-topic thing. You know, there's so much stuff that we can think about doing or changing, from a sustainability perspective. So thought it's a good chance to kind of go through from a nutrition side, what can you do, a few hints and tips. So as I said, please do ask any questions, and we'll definitely make time to answer some of those later. So a few little things about kind of what actually is a sustainable diet. First of all, kind of what are we talking about here? A bit of an age-old question of should I go vegan, to be vegetarian? And then some kind of hints and tips. So it's quite kind of a simple, and hopefully it'll give you a few places to go and have a look, or a few things to think about from a nutrition perspective. So first of all, we can't really start this without actually looking what a sustainable diet is. There are loads of different definitions around, and so it's quite hard to pick, but I thought this one was quite nice, and kind of really we pulled everything together. So it explains that sustainable diets are those diets with low environmental impacts, which contribute to food and nutrition security and to healthy life for present and future generations. Sustainable diets are protective and respectful of biodiversity and ecosystems, culturally acceptable, accessible, economically fair and affordable, nutritionally adequate, safe and healthy, while optimizing natural and human resources. So quite a long definition, quite wordy, but you know, as they've rightly highlighted, the nutritionally adequate and healthy part is really important. And alongside, you know, no matter what kind of state your health is, it's always important to, you know, or kind of what you're gaining, what you're looking to do, thinking where possible, is it nutritionally adequate is a really important thing to consider. So I'm really hopeful this is going to work. This is just a short video, which basically I reckon we could just play this video and I could just not even talk. I think it's a really nice way just to sum up and kind of introduce this topic. So it's just a couple of minutes long, but it just kind of did it really nicely. And it's from the Eat Foundation, and it'll explain a little bit about what they are. So fingers crossed this works.
You know the saying, you are what you eat, but the way we currently eat is in fact ruining our health, the health of others, and that of the planet. Unhealthy food is now deadlier than alcohol, drug, and tobacco use combined. 2.1 billion people are overweight, yet we eat more sugar, fat, and red meat than ever. Still, 821 million go to bed hungry every night. On top of that, our food is the main cause behind species extinction and a third of all global greenhouse gas emissions. So, can we feed a growing population without destroying the planet and ourselves? Science had no clear answer to this question. That's why EAT gathered 37 of the world's best scientists to determine what a healthy and sustainable diet is and how to get there. The result is the Eat Lancet Commission, a scientific blueprint for a healthy and sustainable future. If we change the way we produce, consume, transport, and waste food, we can feed everyone a healthy diet while improving the health of our planet. What does this look like? Meat can stay on our plate, but plants need to be the new main course. We should eat a huge variety of fruits and vegetables and a low amount of meat, dairy, and seafood. We should choose unsaturated fats and stay away from refined grains, highly processed foods, and added sugars. And we have no food to waste. It will take huge changes, but following this plan will lower our risk of cancer, strokes, and diabetes. It could help avoid 11 million adult deaths per year. In fact, consuming and producing food more efficiently and mindfully will help to keep our planet flourishing. We have an answer now. We know the right course for a better future. It's on us to actually take that step. Our food can be the key to solving the biggest challenges we face. Food really can fix it.
Lovely. So hopefully, I appreciate there's some quite hard-hitting stats in there, but just to show you that, you know, I know it can be difficult when we're talking about sustainability and things. You think, well, you know, people are flying around, those big companies are just pumping out stuff. You know, does it really matter if I make a change? Hopefully that report shows that, you know, every little bit can help. Yes, it's not going to change everything, but there are small amounts. If you want to look into this more, the Eat Lancet report is all available online. There's nice summaries, there's other videos and things available for it. So hopefully that gives a little bit of an overview, and there will be a bit of crossover from what I discussed going forwards, but just thought it was quite a nice thought-provoking video, really. So looking at food emissions, I thought this was quite stark, really, but food production accounts for 15 to 30% of greenhouse gas emissions in the UK, which is quite a lot, really. The top 3 offenders are red meat, dairy, and soft drinks. So red meat and dairy, I was like, okay, yeah, they're the ones you often hear about, but soft drinks was quite an interesting addition as the 3rd top one. And the percentages refer to the percentage of greenhouse gas emissions of total dietary intake. So, you know, by making some changes, that's the kind of thing that we can help reduce the emissions, which then kind of goes forward to improving kind of from a sustainability perspective. So what can we do? There's a number of things as that video has already kind of looked into. So from a fish perspective, thinking about sustainable sources, I find the whole fish thing quite confusing and difficult to know, but the Marine Stewardship Stewardship Council is the main place to look. So that's looking at sustaining fish stocks. It minimises the environmental impacts and the effective management of fish, fish stocks around the world. So choosing an approved MSC fish product is certainly one way to help with this. Including oily fish from a health perspective is really important in your diet. Red meat is the one that kind of comes out worst. So there's different amounts that are kind of spouted around, but saying aiming for less than 70 grams per person per day, and aiming to cut out red meat. Now, this is directly in line with some of the cancer prevention recommendations, especially as there's been found to be a link between red and processed meat consumption and colorectal cancer. So not only is this good from a planetary perspective, but from a health side as well. And with a lot of red meat often comes high intakes of saturated fat as well, which certainly can kind of from a long-term condition side of things. Plant proteins, so these need to be prioritized. And what we mean by plant proteins are things like lentils, beans, soya, so things like your tofu and other meat alternatives. Mycoprotein is corn, so that's what corn is, nuts and seeds. So these need to form a little bit of a larger part of the plate. Dairy, moderate consumptions really is the main takeaway. We need to be decreasing overall intake. But one thing I kind of strongly urge is if you do want to switch to alternatives, please make sure that they are fortified with calcium. So most of the ones that you buy in the supermarket, not all, are fortified with calcium. And I know with a lot of things, we don't want to have stuff that's got extra bits in, or, preservatives and bits and bobs. I totally understand that, but fortification of vitamins and minerals is super important, because this is what you really lack if you do cut dairy out. And calcium is super important for our bones and bone health, and especially as you get older, we want to minimize the risk of osteoporosis, osteopenia. We don't want you falling over and breaking bones with the slightest trip. So really making sure that that's one thing to prioritize. From a carbohydrate perspective, choosing your whole grain versions where possible is really important to go for. And then fruit and vegetables. Main thing really is the seasonal aspect of this. So sorry, I've got a spelling mistake there. Choose seasonal and locally produced. There's lots of great calendars and bits and bobs available that you can see, and you can go into to kind of look what's local. Another way is just looking around the supermarket. What's actually really good value at the moment? What is there plenty of? Minimizing air freighted fruit and veg is really quite important. And I think from a seasonal perspective, stuff tastes better when it is in season. So if you think about something like strawberries in the UK in the summer, they taste an awful lot better than they do now, and they tend to be cheaper because they're more abundant. So it's a bit of a win-win really to kind of leave it actually until they are the best, until they taste good, and so you get better benefits. And also I think it's quite nice because then they're a bit of a treat to kind of look forward to, kind of, oh yeah, it's soft fruit season, that's really nice. And so there's a lot of kind of, some additional benefits from that. So if you've ever been to any nutrition talk, whether that be at the hospital, looked things online, been on the NHS website, the Eat Well guide would have likely popped up. So the Eat Well guide has been produced by the government. So it's a representation of what we should be eating across the day from a health perspective. And this mirrors, cancer prevention recommendations. It's for general health and kind of recurrence, reducing risk of recurrence, all of these things. The Eat Well guide pops in alongside those. And there are vegan alternatives. There's vegetarian. There's also some South Asian versions and a few other different dietary types, because I appreciate this isn't always hugely relevant, especially if you follow a slightly different diet, or kind of culturally different diet to a British kind of standard British, I suppose. But what I think is nice to see is that actually this Eat Well guides is important from a sustainable perspective. So it's been stated that if we all followed this kind of way of eating in terms of the proportions, it would produce a 31% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions in the UK from our food. So what I wanted to do more is to reassure you that actually this guide is great from a health perspective, but also a sustainable one. And I would encourage you to have a look, if you do follow all the different alternative diets, to look up to kind of have a better, so it's got a bit of a better representation of the foods that you tend to eat. I do find the UL guide sometimes quite difficult because it's a kind of representation of across the day. So sometimes I appreciate that can be quite difficult to think about from a kind of an individual meal perspective, but it's more of an overview from a day perspective. So I think one of the big questions that often comes up when we're talking about sustainable diets and everything, and there's a lot of big voices I appreciate in this space, is should I go vegan or vegetarian? And I think the answer is not necessarily. I'm not saying don't by any means, but I think what you have to, and certainly kind of what the data recommends, is it's not an absolute must. But what is the most important part is to be switching to more plant-based foods. That's for the beneficial kind of from a sustainability perspective and also dietary-wise. One thing I would really recommend, we don't have time to go into all kind of things from a vegan or vegetarian diet, is be careful for other nutrient deficiencies. So especially on a vegan diet, for example, you cannot get vitamin B12 because that's only found in meat and animal products. And so you can get B12 deficiencies. Things like iron can be more difficult to obtain amongst a couple of other vitamins. So it is something that is absolutely can be a great kind of way of life and eating, but does need a little bit more work and planning. The Vegan Society or there's a Vegetarian Society websites are great, and actually they've got the Vegan Society's got a full-time dietitian working for them, so they're producing some fabulous resources and materials for this. I guess one thing we kind of think about, I think of vegan and vegetarian, is often kind of spouted, is it cheaper? Is it more expensive? You think, oh, you're not buying meat, but then you're buying all sorts of other alternatives that can, can mount up. And actually there was a big study by the Lancet, and it was published in the Lancet quite fairly recently, that found actually switching to a vegan diet can be a third cheaper. But then if you're looking at and a vegetarian diet was fairly similar, but a flexitarian diet, so what we mean by flexitarian is you're eating meat, but you're also having a large amount of kind of plant-based vegetarian, vegan meals, so it's a bit of a both, still decreases your cost by 14%. So from a kind of budgeting and cost perspective, there is obviously some benefits of going the kind of the whole way to being vegan, but then equally you can still convey some benefits by kind of doing partly. But one thing I really wanted to mention is it has to suit you. So it's all well and good in saying this would be fantastic, but actually if you don't like some of the foods, you think I really struggle with eating lots of beans and lentils and it's really tough, or I just don't like them, then actually are you going to have a healthy diet? Because it's going to be quite limited. And food is also a huge amount about enjoying it. And I imagine a few of you on the call maybe going through or have been through cancer treatment, and during cancer treatment is often a time when food just isn't as enjoyable as it once was. That might be because you're feeling a bit sick or you've got taste changes. So if you well, and one thing I should mention about this webinar is I'm talking we do need to take these things with a bit of a bit more individual. If you are not able to eat a varied diet because you're not feeling well or due to the side effects of your cancer or kind of symptoms, then that will need a bit more individualized advice. But one thing is life is there, food is there for enjoyment, and so it's getting that balance in. And I totally appreciate there is kind of the sustainable aspect and often feeling a bit of pressure towards that, but it's getting that mix in. So to give myself as a bit of an example, I would probably class myself as a flexitarian. I've really tried hard to increase in terms of the amount of vegetarian vegan meals. I have quite a lot of dairy in my diet. I don't really like the dairy alternatives. I've tried a few, and for me, they don't quite cut it at the moment. But there's loads of products coming up, and actually, I've been quite enjoying quite a few soya yogurts, for example. And so for me, going kind of fully vegan, I think would be really difficult, and I'd have to make loads of changes, and that's not something I feel I'm prepared or able to do at the moment. But where I am trying to do is be a bit more conscious in terms of my meat consumption, and trying a few new things, testing out tofu. Yet to absolutely nail the best tofu, but I'm giving it a go. And so it's what suits you. I think there shouldn't necessarily be the pressure, but where we can get the most is by switching to more plant-based foods. So there's lots in terms around kind of some simple swaps. So it doesn't mean going vegetarian or vegan. It means you have to change the way that what you're eating. Yes, there are some changes within it. So this came from the BDA, so the British Dietetic Association, released a report called One Blue Dot a few years ago. So it was a sustainability report, and they had a nice little kind of some simple swaps recipes and some ideas. So one of them was so they did one for spaghetti bolognese on the rice, and this is something I use quite a lot, and actually it's quite good. So you replace half the meat with lentils or beans or other things, and that there's some tips, and actually that reduces down the fat intake of the meal. You get more fiber, you get some of your 5 a day, and things like zinc and selenium, iron and calcium, you're getting more of those. So for not changing the taste hugely, you actually get the benefits from it. And similarly on the left, so it's a swap from a creamy kind of chicken tikka to a bean kind of vegetable lentil based curry. And you can see there that there's some benefits from that perspective as well. So it doesn't have to be, I like curries, therefore I can't eat them. It's kind of being a little bit creative or testing things out. And there will be stuff that you don't like, but there'll be things that you're like, oh yeah, this is great. So on to kind of one of the main topics I think that would be really that's really important in an area that I think we can all do a little bit towards and actually can make quite a big positive change is food waste. So I got the stat from, I think it's Love Food Hate Waste website, which we'll come on to a little bit more in a minute. But I thought these were quite shocking statistics. So 60% of food waste comes from our UK homes. 18 million tonnes of carbon dioxide are generated by UK homes in the wasted consumable food and drink. And 8 meals could be saved each week if we stopped binning our food at home. So imagine thinking about the cost from a budgeting perspective. Saving money on 8 meals a week, up to 8 meals a week. That's a huge amount of money that could be saved and food. So it's not just thinking, oh, for the planet this is great. Actually, for your pockets it could be really really fantastic to do that. So what can we do? Just a few ideas. So these are some simple strategies and just things to think about, and I'm sure a lot of you are following some of these similar things, but I think sometimes it's just thinking that little bit further. So what do you already have? Check in the fridge and cupboards before you head to the shops. Bring the foods to the front that you need eating, so you encourage you to pick them so they don't end up under under rubble in the back of your fridge. There's always those few things that just get a bit stuck under things, and you suddenly find them a couple of weeks later and go, oh no, that's gone. So it's being organized. I had a patient in my NHS clinic a few weeks ago who was telling me, so she's just gone through cancer treatment. She's currently just finished her treatment, waiting for scans and things. She's starting to feel a lot better. And she's told me that she was going to do, I can't quite remember what she called it, like No by November or something like that, where she said, I've got so much food in the house because during chemotherapy, my taste changes, kept on switching and swapping all the time. I went from liking one food to another, and I just, I felt like my food, my cupboards are full, and she's quite limited in terms of mobility. So she had lots of tinned food and was relying on other people. So didn't always have the flexibility to buy things when she needed to. So she said, right, what she was going to do was use up, or now that her tastes have changed and her appetite's much better, she was going to start using up some of that food. She said her freezer was absolutely jam-packed and her cupboards were full to the brim. So her plan was to use all that up and only buy the extra little bits that she couldn't, so some of the fresh stuff. So she was really hoping, one of her main things was actually to save quite a bit of money. She was like, Christmas coming up, I want to save some pennies so I can buy some more presents with that. And she was like, also, I've got all this, I paid for it, so I may as well use it. So I thought that was just a really nice idea, and something, I really personally should do as well, and just taking that moment to think, what do I have? What can I make from it? Shopping lists. I talk about shopping lists a surprising amount, if I'm totally honest, in my job, which I kind of hadn't thought I'd ever do. But it focuses your mind on buying what you need. Some people I know, an in and out supermarket, minimal, don't do. I'm a browse every aisle kind of lady. I'm in there for a long time. And that's because I'm just kind of perusing, seeing what's on deal, seeing what's there. Oh gosh, I haven't looked at what the latest biscuit selection. I sometimes pose it as this is for work. I need to have a look, but most of the time it's just me, just browsing. Writing a list can help focus the mind. It also helps often choosing, if you are, say, for example, trying to kind of be healthier, it avoids you going down those aisles that you don't need to, because you don't need to buy stuff. It also stops you from overbuying as well, because you go, it's not on the list, you don't need it. I get in trouble a lot. So my boyfriend's a real stick to the list, come back, that's what he's got. I buy the list plus a few extras. He's like, why on earth did you buy that? And I was like, oh well, I just fancied it. And it drives him absolutely spare. So it's one that I very much need to implement a little bit better. Other things like some of the quick scans, lots of different places have, smart shops and all sorts. That can help you keep track of what you're spending. Especially with the increase in price of food, budgeting has got really difficult, because you think, oh, I used to be able to cook this or have that, and it came in at £30, for example, and it's now coming in at 35. So using the scanners can help, keep on track so you don't get that surprise at the till. Also, some of them have their deals. So if you've got obviously there's plenty of supermarkets, but for example, Sainsbury's and their smart shop, it links to your Nectar card. So if you've got your Nectar prices or whatever, it comes up there so you can see what you've got on a deal, for example, or got reduced prices on. Moving on to deals, the 3 for 2, 3 for £10 yellow sticker. Is it actually a good deal? I am the world's biggest sucker for yellow stickers. I love them. And I often come home and I'm like, oh, look what I got today. I got a yellow sticker. I actually then look at the yellow sticker and realise I've only saved 20p off £3. I think, yeah, that wasn't actually a very good deal. So do double check, don't get lured in like I do on the yellow sticker front. Also, if you're buying 3 for 10, for example, but you only need 2, is that extra food, are you actually just spending more money than you need to? And is that food actually just going to go to waste? So just take a moment, step back and think, why am I buying this? Do I need it? Food storage. So storing your food correctly can really help in terms of its shelf life. Does it need to be in the fridge, on the top, cupboards, cool dark place, whatever it is, just follow that. Something that I've done today, this morning, I've checked my fridge temperature. So your fridge should be kept below 5 degrees Celsius and your freezer at minus 18. This helps keep your food fresher for longer. You're not frazzling your food or keeping it too warm in the fridge or freezer. So another thing, and that can help save your energy bills as well. And so therefore is a kind of a plus alongside. Using a freezer. Freeze it. Freezers are our friends. They're pretty helpful. Apparently, and I've never actually tried this, I'll be interested if anyone actually does this here, but apparently you can just put a whole loaf of bread in and slice it straight from the freezer, and then you could toast it. I've never actually sliced a whole loaf straight from the freezer, so I'm intrigued. But what I have done is sliced it before and then popped in the freezer, so you can get one out at a time. It's great for leftover fruits, bits and bobs. So don't underestimate the power of a freezer. Another thing to make sure is actually that you do use the things in your freezer. I'm an absolute horror for just putting things in. I don't label it very well. And then I've got these anonymous frozen items, which I'm not totally sure what I've got. So just little things to think about. So from a food waste perspective, there's a few things, a few places in terms of kind of recommendations. So if you are on social media, so there is on Instagram, a person called Kate Hall, whose kind of Instagram name is Can I Freeze It? I came across her page a few months ago and it is great. So every Friday she releases a video of a new food and it's all about can I freeze it? So for example, last week's was apple sauce and it's talking about, how do you yes, you can freeze it. How do you prepare it? How do you store it in the freezer? How do you defrost it? But it's all sorts of weird and wonderful things. So a few weeks ago she had one on harissa paste. I don't know, apparently you can freeze it. That's great. It's the kind of thing that you might buy for a recipe and be a bit stuck with. So a great way, if you're not on Instagram, she does have a website, thefullfreezer.com, as well as as another option. The website Love Food Hate Waste, I'll come on to it in the next slide, but is a really fantastic resource. And I will certainly be using it personally and professionally going forwards a lot more. Looking online at things like BBC Good Food, they have a whole reams of leftover recipes. So if you've got those things left over, got a few leeks left in the bottom of the cupboard and you don't, fridge, and you don't know what to do with them, have a look on these websites. There's lots of resources around to help you with that. So this is the Love Food Hate Waste website. So I just picked beans because they were near the top, to be honest, but they have lots of recipes and different bits and bobs and recommendations. But one thing they do have is kind of how to manage different foods. So it tells you, can you freeze it? Where do you store it? Is it in season? Some top tips, and they've got these for all different foods. They've also got links to some recipes as well. So it can be just a really great one if you're lacking inspiration. And I appreciate not everyone's, we're not on MasterChef. We're just trying to use up our beans. Have a look on that website and it might go, oh yeah, I could add it to an omelette. I hadn't thought about putting beans in an omelette, let's do that. So it might just give you that little bit of inspiration that helps from that perspective. Another thing, so if you are a bit more tech savvy, there are a few great apps that are around. So the one that's quite new is called the Yellow Sticker Cookbook. I haven't had a chance to use it. I've just kind of seen it, seen it online and kind of read about it. But this looks like it's going to be totally up my street. So this is an action point for me to take, is to add this to my phone. So then I can use this next time out shopping. So what you do is you're going into the supermarket, you find a yellow sticker option, and you're like, oh yeah, fantastic. These are really cheap turkey breasts. What earth am I going to do with them? So you scan it, and what it'll do is it'll come up with some recipes and ideas of what to do. So whilst you're in the shop, you can then actually buy the additional things to use it, rather than coming home and you go, oh, this was a great deal, but now I've got no idea what to do with it. So I think that's a fantastic idea. Olio is a kind of food sharing app. So it's more of kind of from a local community perspective. You think, I've got some leftover leeks, I don't want to use them, I can't use them, or I don't need them. You can pop those on there. Perhaps your neighbor does need some leeks because they're making, I don't know, a pie or something. So then it's all about sharing and swapping rather than binning food. And then Too Good To Go is more, this is a real favorite of mine. So this is more restaurants, cafes, shops, supermarkets. So if they've got surplus items, they can pop it up for a reduced rate. So for example, for a cafe, there may be an option. They've got some leftover cakes and sandwiches, which they can't kind of share tomorrow. They put it as an option. So a lot of it is magic bags. So you don't quite know what you're going to get. So if you're fatty or kind of very particular, got lots of dietary requirements, it can be quite difficult to do. But they'll say, it's between 5 and 7. You pay up front, and it's often quite a good value for money. And then you go and pick it up at the time, and you've got this random selection. And I've had some absolute steals from this. Some are better than others, and sometimes with all of these things you win and lose because you're never quite sure what you're going to do. But there was, and I'm sure there probably still are. There's an absolutely incredible cake shop in London called Conditor and Cook, and they used to be on it. You had to be quite quick to kind of be able to get their bags because they sell out quite quickly. But I remember getting distinctly, they're quite expensive, their cakes, and I got this box of 3 for about £4, and normally they're about £4 a slice of cakes. So it's a fairly expensive one. Genuinely, absolutely delicious. I've never felt so smug and pleased with myself. And then you feel like you're also saving food waste. So it's all a nice win-win. So there's a few different options and ways to kind of approach it. I appreciate everyone might not be, you know, from a tech perspective, have, you know, different apps and applications and things, but hopefully there's something to consider. Or if you can't do it, you know, is there a family member that you could inspire to try and use something as well? So food labels, the age-old kind of confusion of food labels. You know, now sometimes they're not even on anything. So there's different ones. So you've got your best before. So that's referring to quality. So food will be at its best when consumed before this date. Use by is more of a safety thing. So you mustn't eat food past its use by date, even if it looks and smells okay. And that's because there can be bacterial infections, for example, in there that doesn't smell bad. You know, some foods smell bad when they're off. Not everything does, unfortunately. So if it's past the use by date, you really shouldn't eat it because it can give you food poisoning. Display until is much more retailer things. You don't need to worry about that, for example. I think it's, you know, that these things are quite confusing and difficult, and that's what's led to some of the foods actually not having any of these best before kind of dates, because it's leading to lots of food waste, and especially things like your fruits and vegetables. Quite a few of the supermarkets have done away with them. So what I thought was great, and I've learned this preparing this presentation, is actually there's quite a few foods you can eat for quite a long time after their best before date. So dried pasta is still okay to eat 3 years after its best before date. That's pretty huge. Biscuits, 6 months. Appreciate they may not be the best quality by that time, they get a bit soft or a bit hard, but you've still got 6 months. You know, crisps a month, cereals 6 months, sweeties, you know, confectionery 12 months. So actually it's having a look when you know, perhaps do a bit of a clear out of your cupboard, you come across something that's been stuffed in the back, have a look at it. Actually, is it that much out of date? You know, is it the best before date? Is there still a chance? Because this can lead you to not wasting. You know, a huge amount of this is that you don't then have to throw it away. So it's yeah, I think quite amazing how long things are kind of still okay to eat. A caveat to this is if your immune system is affected, so if you are on treatment, you know your immune system is lower and you've been told to be a little bit more cautious, please be more cautious, because food safety and hygiene is much more important at that time, because you are more susceptible to infections. So it's perhaps being a little bit more a little bit more careful, and you know, not perhaps being a little bit more adventurous with some of the items would be a word of caution. But if you're not undergoing treatment at the moment, then that is okay. So I thought it'd be nice to have a few little ideas of something that's maybe you do these already, maybe you don't. Things like, so we've, you know, just had Thanksgiving, loads of pumpkins happened that yesterday, or Halloween. Halloween has got to be the biggest food waste issue I think around, to be honest. We carve them out and then put them outside and then throw them away, which is a bit of a sad thing, really. But pumpkin seeds, you know, keep them, roast them in the oven, and you've got a tasty snack. Broccoli stalks, you know, we tend to use the florets at the top, but use the stalks to soup, stir fries. You could even spiralize them like courgette, something a little bit different. Potato peels, make homemade crisps. You know, if you're having potatoes anyway, you're not buying anything additional to make this. You place them on a baking tray, drizzle with a little oil, salt, herbs, spices, you know, whatever you fancy, and roast until they're crisp. You know, the humble potato is a nice cheap option, you know, especially at the moment. It's a great option. You know, you might well be having potato alongside meals. Just use the peelings. save them. You know, get a bonus snack before your meal. If you're having a roast on a Sunday, you could have the crisps as a little snack before, and then your roast. So another idea, vegetable water. This one's a really good one from a health perspective. So you can use the water to make gravies or sauces, and this has lots of nutrients in as well. So you'll use the nutrients leach out of the vegetables when they're boiling in water. So if you use that water, then you get the benefits. You may see, you know, when you've cooked something, the water turns a bit of a funky color, you know, maybe a bit orange when you've boiled carrots. You know, that's because some of the nutrients have leached out. So why not use them to make gravies? You know, you're saving that as well. Parmesan rinds, great little extra flavor into soups, add it in, or into pasta sauces, for example. And then fresh herbs, there's so many things, and I could have done a whole page on fresh herbs, but I thought perhaps I'll just stick to one thing for the moment, and encourage you to go and have a look if that's something you struggle with. So one thing you can do is freeze in an ice cube tray. So you cut up your herb, you know, with the herbs and stalks if you want as well. Put them into an ice cube tray with oil and melted butter. Freeze this, and then you can get them out and put them straight into the pan when you want to. So it's a great way, and you know, often have a few kind of slightly manky herbs at the bottom. Yes, they're not that pretty from a garnish perspective, but from a taste side of things, they're absolutely fab. So that's great. And then, so to kind of summarize, hopefully, you know, this was more meant to be a bit more thought-provoking rather than really specific. And I think there's no one way to do things, which is really important to think, because I know a lot of people do feel a bit of guilt that they're not doing things right, or they might be wasting food. And, you know, I know especially during treatment, you know, food wastage is a big thing, because your taste change, you don't fancy it, or you suddenly feel sick, or, you know, the time isn't right, and that can be really difficult. But it's being creative during that time. You know, can you pop those things in the freezer? You know, can you save it and try tomorrow? All those things, then actually you can come back to it. But when you're feeling good and strong, there's certainly some things you can do to help from a health and, you know, planet perspective. So thinking about adding more plant-based foods into your diet, you know, perhaps try that bolognese 50-50. You know, pick up a packet of tofu and give it a try. Follow the Eat Well guide. You know, that is from a health perspective, you know, for chronic conditions, for cancer, that is protective. You know, that is what we do recommend, and follows alongside that. By shopping smartly, you can save money. You can save a huge amount of money by just thinking and being used, you know, using food as you need, and also at the same time being more sustainable. Food waste, I think, is such a hugely important thing. And I had a couple of stats here I haven't read out, so I will do. Apparently 20 million whole slices of bread are thrown away every day in the UK. That's absolutely mind-blowing in my mind. 20 million. You know, imagine if they just pop them in the freezer. You know, even if you use them as breadcrumbs. You know, that's absolutely massive. And 3.1 million glasses of milk. Those are huge numbers. So anything we do to change will make that a little bit easier, will certainly help from a sustainability perspective, but hugely, and I think predominantly, especially given the price of everything at the moment, from a financial perspective. You know, be creative with food. Try the potato peel crisps. You know, try a couple of things to use up the extras, so you're not having that waste there. And all of these will help you to save money, be healthier, and be more sustainable. So there's you know, a number of things to do, and you know, today's talk is not meant to kind of make you feel bad if you're not doing these things at all. You know, that the majority of us aren't doing huge amounts, but actually if there's one thing that you can take away and perhaps try or consider going forwards, then hopefully that will be helpful. There's lots of information available on the internet. The British Dietetic Association's got quite a good food fact sheet. The Food Standard Agency's got a lot more information on best before dates and things like that if you want information. That Love Food Hate Waste website is hugely, like, it's fantastic, genuinely super good, lots of recipes as well. And you know, there are lots of kind of environmental and governmental reports, like the Eat Lancet, for example, if you are kind of really interested and want to read more. So that's me for the moment. If you do have any questions, we'll go through those. But if anything going forwards, I've just left my details there, so please do get in touch. But I can see that we've got a few few questions. So I'll hand over to Alice to kind of
Perfect.
read them out, but hopefully that was a nice little summary, a few things to think about.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rachel, for a really informative, really accessible session that you just led there. I know that I've made a few notes. I've even been taking photos of your slides as a bit of a reminder of some of the brilliant tips that you've shared, which are really easy to implement to make those everyday changes. So thank you again. Yeah, as you say, we have already got a few questions in the Q&A, so thank you everybody for sending those in. If we start with the first question, which is somebody who is asking, how can they improve their hemoglobin without eating red meat?
Yeah, so iron's a good, so your hemoglobin and kind of iron stores, all of that are all linked. And red meat is our best source of iron to help with that. So with iron, you've got heme iron and non-heme iron. So your red meat is heme iron, and then you have got things like your vegetables and things that are non-heme. It can be really difficult, and it certainly is more challenging, but can happen. So what I'd recommend, and certainly if this is something that is a concern of you, your iron stores or your hemoglobin is a little bit low, is thinking, okay, maybe I need to reduce my red meat, but switching it for some good alternatives. So your leafy green vegetables, are some of those, and your beans and pulses are other major kind of sources where you can get that iron from them. Yes, your absorption isn't totally as good. Another thing I can recommend is, if you do need to take iron tablets, and sometimes this can happen for a number of reasons, whether it's dietary wise or not, or kind of sources you would like to take them, is take them alongside a source of vitamin C. And this is the same with your meals as well. So vitamin C aids in the absorption of iron to help kind of boost up your iron levels. So it can just help you kind of absorb and do a little bit better with that. There's no avoiding the fact it is more difficult, but there are plenty of people say having a full vegan diet full time that have perfectly good kind of iron stores. But certainly if you've found it's difficult, and it may be that, for example, treatment has made things more difficult for you, you've had surgery, for example, it may be the diet alone is going to be quite tricky to keep that up. But what I would recommend is, the vegan website has a fantastic kind of whole section, because this is a big kind of big issue and like a big question from lots of people, is the vegan site has a whole section on this as well, and recommendations on how much to take. So I would head over there and kind of follow specifically their recommendations, or think about going that 50-50 perspective so you still get some.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rachel. Our second question is asking, are many dairy alternatives heavily processed? And I know I've kind of picked up in the media at the moment, there's a lot of conversation about these processed, ultra processed foods. So I wonder if you can talk a little about that.
Yeah, good question. And yeah, the kind of ultra processed kind of thing is a big kind of, there's a lot flying around about it, and I think it's quite complex and quite confusing what's coming out. And there's some big voices saying some big things that kind of a little bit scaremongery at times, if I'm totally honest, and kind of make us confused as like, oh my goodness, what should I pick? So just to give you a bit of background on the processing side of things, and then I'll go into the dairy. So anything that's changed out of its original form, so for example, an apple is unprocessed. If you buy a packet of sliced apples, that is a stage of processing. But if you buy a tin of apple puree, that's probably ultra processed by the time it gets to that point, because there's been a number of stages, and often there's additional preservatives needed to get it to that stage. There's a range, and I think it's very difficult to avoid all processed foods, because most things by the time they get to the supermarket have gone through a stage or two of processing. What we're looking for is thinking, actually, how many additional things have needed to be added? Is this vastly different from its original form? And the more there's kind of been the changes, the more kind of things think, actually maybe I should be having that a little bit less. than, you know, or choosing the alternatives. I think, right, I really want some apple sauce, and you can't always make it. So, you know, we can't all have all the time to do, but think, actually, can I make this at home? And then I'm in control of what I've added, and, you know, taste wise can sometimes be a lot better. So processing is a multi kind of big thing, and it is very difficult to avoid. It's just being a little bit sensible, but then convenience, quite frankly, sometimes convenience is absolutely what we need. We're busy people, we've got lots of things going on, and we can't all spend time making everything from scratch at home. So it's just kind of getting that balance where we can. From a dairy perspective, yes, there is some levels of processing, and some and it's difficult because I don't think I can give you an exact answer on some being better than others. But in terms of the fortification, yes, that is, I guess, an added step of processing. But what that is doing is it's meaning that that product is a lot better and a really good substitute to have, because some of the alternative milks you can buy, say, I don't know, you went into your local health food store or your farm shop, and they're selling some rice milk. That has got, yes, it has got some benefits, but it doesn't have very much protein. It doesn't have any calcium in it. And actually, that's, you know, it may taste delicious and great, but from a health perspective, you're going to be missing that huge amount. So it's choosing one that you're comfortable with as well. And the range is so much better these days that I think it enables to have a chance. You know, 5 years ago, if you wanted oat milk, there was one type of oat milk, or soy milk, there was 2 types. And actually, a lot of these companies are doing an awful lot from a sustainability perspective to make it better. But there will always be a certain level of process, because an oat to getting milk does require some. It just depends how many additional things are added along the way. So yeah, in the short answer, they are processed more than cow's milk is, because that comes, you know, from said cow. Yes, there can be some pasteurization processing, but that's important for a lot of other reasons. So they are more heavily processed, but going for one that's just got the fortification and kind of no bonus extras is absolutely fine to go for.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Rachel, that process doesn't always mean bad.
Yes,
yeah, absolutely. Okay, I think we'll have time for 1, possibly 2 more questions. We'll see how we go. So the next question that's been asked is there specific dietary advice for patients in remission from advanced ovarian cancer? I suppose that could be extended to in remission from other types of cancer as well. So somebody who is sort of on their kind of post-treatment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Often the recommendations are very much the same across the board in terms of post-treatment. The World Cancer Research Fund has really great information in terms of kind of the recommendations post-treatment and to minimize chance of recurrence and cancer prevention. And actually what a lot of them fall into is, from a dietary perspective, is following things like the Eat Well plate, as we discussed earlier, minimizing, reducing down your intake of red meats, increasing your plant proteins, getting that variety in. Dairy wise, there is always a little that can be a little bit more controversial. I appreciate, obviously, today from a sustainability perspective, we want to minimize it, but it does have additional benefits. And, we haven't, and this wasn't kind of the scope of today, things like exercise is a hugely important part in terms of just general health and remission. But there isn't anything specifically from advanced ovarian cancer that I would say additionally to add in. Having a healthy weight, or at least being able to keep your weight stable, so you're not gaining weight or not losing weight hugely unintentionally. Yes, if it is within the healthier range, then that adds additional benefits from kind of a cancer perspective, also other chronic conditions. But one thing that's kind of a primary aim is to make sure that it is stable, or you're not losing weight unintentionally or gaining it. But I think a lot of what we've talked about today very much, is legitimate and follows that advice, and then you can get the additional benefit feeling kind of from a sustainability perspective. You're doing something positive from there as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Rachel. I think perhaps time for one more. So for the other 2 questions that have been asked, we'll make a note of those. And as we said at the start, we'll put those to Rachel and get an email sent out to all of you to answer those final questions. So to end on, we've got one asking, should cancer patients avoid sauces in jars, for example, curry sauces, pre-made sauces?
Yeah, good question. And I think maybe we don't need to necessarily say cancer patients, should people be avoiding those? And this kind of falls a bit into the processed food thing as well. There can be, so when there's the kind of the sauces, they add things in, so they add preservatives so that they've got a really long shelf life. Now, the benefit of having a really long shelf life is you can buy one, pop it in your cupboard, and then, a few months down the line, you think, oh, I need something to make over with, say, with my leftovers. So I've got some random bits in the fridge. I want to make a curry because that's quite a good, shove it all in dish. You can then get that curry sauce out the cupboards. Bang, actually you've used all your leftover waste from your vegetables or whatever, your leftover Sunday roast meat, whatever it might be, and actually it's nice and easy to do. But with those kind of products, because they need some preservatives and things, they often do, because they're long lasting, they do contain sometimes quite a lot of sugar and the preservatives, which, if we're being ideal for a health perspective, cancer patient or not, yes, maybe they're not for an everyday use, but I think they certainly have a convenience factor. And if you're really tired, and if you're going through treatment or after treatment, you're really tired and struggling to spend lots of time cooking, then actually, if this enables you to eat your meal and you can have that variety and get that taste in, or, if your taste changes and you find spice really nice, then it means that you can have a food that you wouldn't necessarily have the energy or maybe the ability to be able to cook. So it's not a kind of yes, no. If we were all in a wonderful environment and we had unlimited money and time or access to a chef, I'd say no, absolutely. Put them in the bin and cook it up fresh. That'd be wonderful. But we don't. Sadly not. So wouldn't it be wonderful? And so using those is absolutely fine. Perhaps not all day, every day, if you can avoid it. But if it means you're going to eat or certainly get some vegetables or extra bits in, then absolutely go for it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, I think a lot of what I'm kind of hearing from you today is that there aren't hard and fast rules about most of these things. It's, do what you can. And thank you so much for taking the time to answer those questions. So we'll bring our webinar to a close now. So a big thank you as well to everybody who's attended today. As I say, we'll get a follow-up email sent with final questions. And a huge thank you again to Rachel for, coming along and sharing her expertise, putting together a really fantastic presentation that hopefully everyone's gained a lot from today. So we'll say goodbye. And as I mentioned, do feel free to give the support line a call as well if there's anything relating to this topic that we might be able to help you with. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thanks.